The Iraqi sun didn't rise so much as it ignited, an angry white disk that turned every sheet of metal into a brand and every breath into grit. By 0930, forward operating base Copper Ridge had that mirage blur haze you get when heat climbs off the sand like smoke. Most days the base just baked and grumbled and kept the machines alive. Not this day. Mortars fell in a steady, punishing cadence, the kind that makes conversation turn into clipped syllables and eye contact. The first salvo tore a gouge in the outer berm, the next chewed through the flight line. Voices on every net tangled with static and fear, the kind that leaks into transmissions even when the words sound professional. 2 AH-64s were already black husks on the tarmac. Rotors twisted, canopies starred and glittering, ammo bays cooked off into dark petals of steel. One Apache remained intact inside the maintenance hangar. Across every radio circuit, the order landed like a thrown hammer. Any Apache pilot on Copper Ridge, any pilot. This is Lieutenant Colonel Ellison. We need air cover now. Silence. The qualified pilots were either wheels up in other sectors or strapped to cots in the aid station, floating under morphine drips. A third round hit somewhere near POL. The hangar doors shuddered, dust streaming from the rafters in thin, pale curtains. Half the maintenance crew flinched, the other half just locked up. Then a mechanic set her wrench down. "I can fly it," she said. Sergeant Naomi Reyes was 5'4" in boots, wiry from years of hauling panels and beating seized fasteners into submission. Grease smudged her forearms and traced comet tails along her cheekbones where she'd pushed sweat away with the back of her hand. Her hair was braided tight and tucked, her name tape sweat dark. People called her Socket, sometimes Ray, more often, "Hey, can you listen to my weird vibration?" Someone laughed, a nervous, automatic sound that died on its own. "She's maintenance," a tech muttered, like the word was a wall. Naomi didn't flinch. "I know 2687 better than anyone in this building," she said, thumb hooking toward the Apache under the lights. "I brought her back from a cracked combuster can, a sick-tail gearbox, and a ghost short that fried 3 FCUS before anyone believed me. She's fueled, wired, and aligned. I can fly her." "Sergeant," Ellison said from the doorway, eyes red-rimmed, sleeve ash-blackened. "You're not flight certified." "No, sir." Reyes's voice didn't rise. "But I've practiced every emergency procedure this airframe has. I know how she breathes. And we don't have another option." Staff Sergeant Harlan Pierce, thick-necked, good-natured, the shop's loudest skeptic, shook his head. "Naomi, a simulator isn't an Apache. Dead simple." Her jaw moved once. "We're past simple." Outside, another detonation walked in closer, wrapped the hangar doors with shrapnel. Something fell off a shelf and clanged like a warning bell. Ellison looked at the blown flight line, at the single perfect helicopter bathed in industrial light, at the faces, fear, sweat, a little hope knifing through. "If you crash that bird," he said, voice steady because that's what command required, "I will have to court-martial you." "If I don't try, sir," she answered, meeting him square, "those guys on the ground don't get a second chance." The colonel's eyes closed for the length of a breath, like he was signing something on the inside of his skull. When they opened, the decision was done. "Get it airborne, Sergeant," he said. "Call sign Wrench 1. That's an order." Naomi didn't wait to see who approved. She snatched a flight helmet off a hook, sprinted for 2,687, and climbed the stub wing with a speed born from muscle memory and adrenaline. The heat outside slapped like a hand. The cockpit smelled like faint hydraulic, hot plastic, and the ghost of JP-8 no matter how many times you wiped the rails. She slid in, and the seat fit like a habit you don't admit to. Overhead panel, DC power, check. A PU dash on, rotor brake off. Engine start, left then right. The auxiliary power unit spooled with that comforting high whine. Gauges woke up. MFDS bloomed into green life. The rotor head began to creep, then churn into a blur that bent the light. She dug into her chest pocket and pulled out a flattened square of photo paper. The edges had gone soft from years of being handled. A younger man in a flight suit stood beside a UH-1, hand on the cowling, smile half crooked. Major Gabriel Reyes, USAF. In ink, in her own cramped handwriting from a decade ago. For Dad, who flew, so I'd learn how. She taped the photo above the altimeter where the horizon would frame it, always. "Copper Ridge, this is Wrench 1, Naomi said, hands calm on controls that had only ever known her touch as a mechanic. "Powering for lift." "Wrench 1, Ellison came back in her headset. "Godspeed." She eased collective, watch torque, match pedals, keep it all married, and the Apache shrugged off gravity. The sensation wasn't like the old, forgotten sim tucked behind Bay 3 with the cracked seat foam and CRT glow. It was a living animal thrumming around her, impatient to hunt, the cyclic so sensitive it felt telepathic. For a second, fear fluttered. Thin, mean, useless. She looked at her father's smile and leveled at 500 feet. Desert unfolded, a chalk-pale map punctured by smoke columns rising in oily black. "Wrench 1, Copper Ridge Actual," Ellison crackled. "Troops in contact 2 mics north, bearing 042. Multiple technicals with mounted guns. Mortar team in defilade, clear hot." "Copy," Reyes said. She'd armed missiles on hard stands thousands of times, tested chain guns, calibrated TADS/PNVS for pilots who wandered in with coffee and jokes. Her thumbs moved now without searching. Master arm to arm. Hydra selected. Helmet sight cued. Crosshairs slid when she turned her head. The system followed like a loyal dog. Target lead gun truck. Don't think about bodies. Think about capability. She squeezed. The rocket ran out on a white thread and bloomed the truck into orange confetti. The second technical slewed instinctively and stalled. The third peeled left. Reyes banked, the horizon tilting, the helmet cue dancing. 2 more rockets. 2 more hits. The convoy turned from a line into scattered metal. The radio went ragged with relief. "Direct hits. Direct hits. Wrench 1, you're making angels today." Then the Apache barked at her, shrill, insistent. Missile warning. "Not today," she told nobody, thumbed countermeasures and kicked the bird into a brake so hard the straps bit. Flares peeled off and out glared the sun, and somewhere behind her a warhead decided it liked sugar better than meat. The blast thumped the tail. The helicopter shivered. She felt it the way a mechanic feels a lie. The grit in the cyclic, the smear in the pedal, the new vibration that didn't belong. "Tail rotor drive complaining," she said into the net. Calm because panic infects. Her eyes flicked. RPM fluctuating. Temperature still in the green for now. Bearing scored, or worse. 10 minutes of forgiveness, maybe. "Wrench 1, RTB," Ellison said, steel flat. "That's an order." She looked at the burning trucks, at the muzzle flashes pricking the dust, at the smoke ribbon marking the mortar team's hide. She looked at the photo taped above the altimeter. "Negative," she said. Not loud, not dramatic. Just true. "I've got this." She rolled back in. Rockets walked into the mortar's pit with the merciless logic of ballistics. The chain gun thumped and stitched, 30mm punctuation that turned returning fire into ground clutter. A man ran and then there was no man. Another truck tried to be brave and then it wasn't. The vibration got worse. Tail rotor yowling now, the whole airframe wanting to slew. She worked pedals like a concert pianist whose left hand is cramping and still refuses to stop the song. Her forearms shook. Sweat blurred her eyes and stung the raw spots where safety wire likes to catch skin. "Copper Ridge," she said, quiet enough that the radio almost missed it. "Convoy neutralized. PAX moving. Winchester rockets. Returning base." "Copy." Ellison again with something behind the word that hadn't been there earlier. "We see you." The pattern back felt like holding a door shut against a storm. She kept the approach shallow, bled speed early, talked herself through the checklist aloud the way she did when she taught privates to remove panels. Don't rush the last 5 screws, that's when you strip something. Final. Skids kissed sand and bounced. She rode the wobble, settled, cut. Engines wound down with a metallic sigh like a tired animal. For a long heartbeat, she didn't move. The cockpit went hot without rotor wind, the world shrinking to breathing and the aftertaste of adrenaline. Then she peeled the photo off gently, folded it twice, slid it back where it had lived for years. When she climbed down, her legs trembled. She took the helmet off, and the bass sound rushed in. Voices, clapping, someone crying because nobody had died who wasn't supposed to. Not today. Mechanics poured out of the hangar. Pilots from the med tent limped on IV poles they were not supposed to be moving. One of the cooks still in an apron with flour on it, all of them making a noise that felt like a dam breaking. Lieutenant Colonel Ellison walked through the semicircle of people. His face was all angles, unreadable until he stood 3 feet from her. "Sergeant Reyes," he said formally, "you violated regs. You took a $50 million aircraft without certification. You ignored a direct order." "Yes, sir," she said, and didn't blink. He saluted, the crisp, unambiguous kind you give to a flag. "And you saved 47 American lives." The sound that came off the tarmac then wasn't just cheering. It was relief growing teeth and turning into joy. Harlan Pierce whooped himself hoarse. Somebody started chanting the call sign that had been born 5 minutes earlier and sounded ancient already. "Wrench 1! Wrench 1!" Naomi didn't lift her hands. She touched her chest pocket to feel the thin rectangle of paper and let the noise roll past her like rotor wash. By the end of the week, the story had outrun Copper Ridge. The incident report hopped continents with the speed of secure email. A 2-star at Al Udeid read it twice, then pinged someone at the Pentagon whose calendar always looked like bad Tetris. Legal wanted to know if this was heroism or heresy. Standardization wanted to know how to write it down without encouraging 1,000 terrible imitators. Public affairs wanted to know if they were allowed to tell it. A JAG team and 2 aviators with the permanent squint of people who've stared at too many screens flew in. They reviewed helmet audio, Reyes's clipped voice calling her own failures before the instruments did. They pulled 2 687's drivetrain apart and put pieces on carts like a surgeon laying out organs. Tail rotor drive shaft scored, bearings pitted, shrapnel freckles in the tail boom. They interrogated everyone from Ellison to the kid who restocked the flare buckets. "Why did you think you could fly?" a captain asked Naomi across a folding table. 12 hours had passed and the sand had crept inside the seams of the building. Everything crunched. She told them about the forgotten sim behind Bay 3 with the fans that rattled and the CRTs that made the room glow like an aquarium. How she taught herself flow and failure, repetition until the moves lived in her wrists. How she'd failed the eye chart by 1 line at 18 and bled for it quietly by learning the machine instead. "Did anyone encourage you?" the captain pressed, like encouragement would make it a conspiracy. "No," Naomi said. "No one knew. I don't post training montages." A major with a 1,000-yard glare watched her hands while she spoke. "You flew like someone who knows what breaks," he said finally. "I do," she said. 2 weeks later, they put 3 officers behind a table in a room that smelled like overbrewed coffee and cleaning solvent. The senior colonel had a face like a brick wall had decided to be kind for once. "Sergeant Reyes," he said, "you put command in a difficult position. You acted outside regulation. You disobeyed a lawfully given order." "Yes, sir." He closed the folder. "And you did it to save your brothers and sisters. This board takes no disciplinary action. Further," he glanced at the aviators flanking him, both of whom fought not to smile, "your unit will enter an honorary aviator designation for you. Call sign Wrench 1, with the citation to reflect actions under fire." Naomi's throat did the opposite of what throats are supposed to do when you want to talk. She saluted instead. As she turned for the door, the colonel added, softer, like they were the only 2 people in the building. "Your father would have been proud." She stopped, halfway to the hall. It took her a beat to find the voice that fit. "Thank you, sir." 6 months later, Alabama air was heavy and green instead of dry and metallic. At Fort Rucker, in a classroom papered with diagrams of transmissions and swash plates, 24 helicopter maintainers sat with notebooks open and skepticism splayed openly across their faces. An emergency cross-qualification course had been born out of a weird mix of necessity and the will to name what had happened without inviting a disaster. Basic flight operations for maintainers, meant not to turn mechanics into cowboys, but to give them vocabulary and instincts that might buy minutes when minutes mattered. Naomi Reyes stood at the front in a flight suit that wasn't quite new anymore, hands clean for once, a ring of burnished steel on a chain at her neck, the bearing that had nearly seized, polished now into a reminder she could touch. "I'm not here to tell you to break rules," she began. "I'm here to tell you the rules don't cover every hour of every war. Preparation does." She talked about loving the thing you fix enough to learn its language, about the feel of a tail rotor that's lying to you, about the way fear tries to climb into your hands. She told them that courage doesn't feel like fire. Most of the time it feels like doing what you've practiced while your heart makes poor decisions behind your ribs. A kid in the third row, baby mustache, nervous leg, raised his hand. "Sergeant, what if we train and the day comes and we're still not enough?" Naomi thought of the empty seat in her father's old car, of the photo that had lived in 1,000 pockets, of the day in the hangar when her voice sounded like someone else's courage. She didn't put any of that in her answer. "Then you fail," she said without ornament. "But you fail trying. What you don't do is watch the sky burn and say, 'That's someone else's job.'" After class, Lieutenant Colonel Ellison, transferred stateside now to shepherd the program he'd accidentally midwifed, met her in the hallway. They looked at the display outside the lab together. 2 badges under glass, one scuffed and silver with capped G. Reyes, Fly Safe engraved shallow, the other new and bright with SGTN Reyes, Wrench 1 shining like a dare. Between them, a brass plate read, "She fixed the bird, then flew it." "You know," Ellison said, thumb hooked in a pocket like he didn't quite know what to do with his hands. "I wrote 3 versions of the letter to your family that day. None of them were good." Naomi smiled without showing teeth. "I rehearsed crashing quietly," she said. "Also, not good." They stood there, 2 people bound by a decision that could have ended both of them, listening to the hum of a building that housed 100 ways to keep a rotor turning. "You hesitated less than I did," he admitted. "I had less to lose on paper," she said. "We both know that's not the whole math." He nodded. "Still, the rarest kind of courage is the kind that doesn't announce itself." "Quiet things last," she said. He pointed at the badges. "So do quiet things." Copper Ridge never forgot. You can tell the stories that matter by the way they shrink in the telling. Less flourish, more gravity. Years later, a new crew chief would lower a panel and listen to a drivetrain with her palm, and someone would say, "Do you know why we test tails like that?" And the answer would be a shrug and then a name, Reyes. Sometimes, in the long middle of a maintenance night, when the hangar felt like a cathedral built from rivets, Naomi would take the old photo out and set it on a wing beside a thermos of bad coffee. The man in the flight suit always looked like he'd just told a joke. She'd trace the ink letters with one finger and say, like a promise she kept renewing, "We're still flying, Dad." And when the next desert morning somewhere needed someone to step forward, there'd be a sergeant on a flight line, hands black with work, heart steady from practice, looking at a machine she knew more intimately than any form would ever capture. She'd hear a voice on a net asking if there were any pilots on base. And she'd say, in a tone that made room for no other answer, "I can fly it."